Have you ever been in a connection that seemed good on the surface? He texted you. He smiled. He stayed in touch. But deep down, something felt uncertain. You couldn't quite explain it. He didn't say anything wrong, and yet you found yourself wondering, does he really mean this? Is he truly into me, or am I just someone to pass the time with? You're not looking for drama. You're not asking for too much. You just want to feel secure, seen, wanted, not occasionally, not conditionally, but genuinely. The thing is, when a man truly wants you, you won't have to keep asking yourself that question. His actions will answer it for you, and the answer will feel like peace, not confusion. You didn't mean to chase him. You didn't even realize it at first. Maybe it started with a text you sent because he hadn't messaged you all day. Then another one just to check in. You justified it, you're just being caring, being present, showing that you're available. And that's okay, right? But somewhere deep in your chest you felt that tug, that quiet, uneasy ache. You weren't texting because you felt full. You were texting because you felt anxious. You were chasing a sense of closeness that wasn't being returned in the way your heart needed. And that's where it begins, not in the act of chasing, but in the fear of not being chosen. We've been taught that love is about effort, that the more you give, the more you'll receive, that if he's pulling away, you just need to show him how amazing you are. So you try harder, you dress up more, you become more agreeable. You don't bring up that thing that bothered you. You silence your needs. You stay even when your intuition is screaming for space, not because you're desperate, but because you're afraid of walking away before he sees your worth. And yet with every effort to prove yourself, something inside begins to crumble. The version of you that once felt whole, radiant, confident, that version starts to shrink. You become the woman who waits for texts, who analyzes every emoji, who celebrates breadcrumbs as if they were a feast. And the saddest part, you know this isn't you. You weren't always like this. You were once the woman who glowed when she walked into a room, who laughed without checking if it was too much, who said what she felt because her feelings mattered. That version of you didn't chase. She attracted, she received, she believed in her value. So what happened? What happened is emotional conditioning layered over years, shaped by childhood wounds, heartbreaks, and the false belief that love must be earned through effort. If you grew up having to work for attention, you learned that love is a reward, not a right. If you've ever been in a relationship where your worth was questioned or ignored, you may have internalized the idea that you're too much when you ask for more or not enough when he grows distant. And so when someone pulls away, it feels familiar, painful but familiar. And chasing becomes a coping mechanism, not to win love, but to avoid abandonment. But let me tell you this. Gently chasing never brings the connection your heart craves. It brings performance. It brings anxiety. It brings temporary relief, followed by deeper confusion. Because what you're really chasing is emotional safety, and that cannot be forced. It can only be received when offered freely. True intimacy requires mutual movement, two people choosing each other, not one constantly reaching while the other recoils. And yet it's not your fault. If you find yourself in this pattern, don't blame yourself. Don't shame the part of you that longs to be loved. That part is beautifully human, but she needs to be reminded of something vital. Love flows where value is felt, not where it is begged for. You don't need to chase anyone who truly sees you. You don't need to overextend for someone who genuinely values you. When you're the right woman for the right man, your presence will be enough, not your persuasion, not your persistence, your presence. Let this be the beginning of a new story, a story where you stop running after love and start standing in your worth. A story where you no longer mistake silence for mystery or inconsistency for passion. A story where you walk away from the games and walk toward yourself. Because when you do, when you truly reclaim that quiet power inside you, something shifts, and he will feel it. And suddenly the woman who once chased becomes the woman he prays to catch up with. It often starts with a whisper, a barely noticeable flutter in your chest. He takes a little longer to reply. He cancels plans last minute. His energy feels different. And even though your mind tries to explain it away, he's just busy. Maybe he's tired, your body knows. Your heart senses a shift. And that's when it begins, the overthinking, the tension, the sudden need to fix what doesn't even have a name yet. You don't feel safe anymore. Emotional safety is not about whether he yells or insults you. It's not even about whether he's still technically around. It's about whether your heart can relax in his presence. Whether you can breathe without holding your emotions hostage. Whether you can express what you feel without being afraid that it will push him away. When a woman doesn't feel safe emotionally, she doesn't go quiet. She compensates. She gives more. She stretches herself thinner and thinner, hoping that more love will solve the emptiness inside. That maybe, just maybe, if she does enough, he will come closer again. But here's the truth. You're not needy. You're not crazy. You're responding to emotional instability in the most human way, by seeking closeness. It's what our nervous systems are wired to do. The problem is not that you want connection. The problem is when you sacrifice your peace just to hold on to it. When a man becomes inconsistent, or when he subtly pulls back, your system interprets it as a threat. Not just to the relationship, but to your emotional equilibrium. Suddenly, your body is in fight or flight mode. You send more texts. You replay conversations in your head. You ask mutual friends if he's okay. You wonder what you did wrong. You shift into a state of self-blame, thinking if you were just a little more this or a little less that, things would feel secure again. But love that requires anxiety to maintain is not love. It's survival. A man who truly wants you will create emotional safety not just through words, but through presence, consistency, and attunement. You won't have to guess how he feels. You won't have to analyze his silences. You won't feel like your heart is constantly tiptoeing around landmines, afraid that one honest conversation will be the end. Real safety feels like I can be myself here. I don't have to earn this. If something feels off, I can talk about it. So when you find yourself chasing, pause, not to punish yourself, but to ask a softer question. What am I afraid of losing? Is it his attention, or is it the story you built around him? Are you afraid of being alone, or are you afraid of what it would mean if someone didn't choose you after you gave your all? Sometimes the thing we're clinging to isn't the man. It's our hope. Hope that this time things will be different. Hope that if we try hard enough, someone will finally stay. But here's the thing. The right person will stay even when you're not performing. The right person will stay even when you're quiet, messy, vulnerable, unfiltered. He won't stay because you're chasing. He'll stay because he genuinely wants to. And that makes all the difference. Let go of the chase, not because it's weak, but because your soul is tired of proving something that was never yours to prove. Let yourself rest. Let yourself be. And watch how your energy shifts when you no longer feel like you're fighting to be chosen. Because when you feel emotionally safe within yourself, you stop chasing people who make you feel unsafe. And that is the beginning of real power. There's something quietly magnetic about a woman who doesn't chase. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't need to over-explain to be understood. Her silence says more than her words. Her stillness is not passivity, it's presence. A deep, grounded awareness of her own worth. And when she walks into a room, people feel it. He feels it. You see, the energy of chasing is rooted in lack. It's driven by the subconscious belief, I have to do more to keep love. And from that energy, everything becomes a performance. Your text messages are crafted for response. Your actions are filtered through the lens of how they'll be perceived, and your heart becomes a transaction. If I give enough, he'll choose me. But the energy of a woman who doesn't chase is rooted in self-trust. She doesn't ask, "What can I do to make him stay?" She asks, "Does this connection honor me as I am?" This energy, this deep alignment with self, doesn't come from pretending not to care. It's not about playing hard to get or using silence as a tactic. That's still chasing, just in disguise. True, non-chasing energy is peaceful. It's soft but firm. It's open but discerning. It doesn't need to convince or control. It simply observes, receives, and decides. And when a man feels that something shifts in him, suddenly he realizes he's not the center of your world, that your light isn't dimmed by his absence, that your joy isn't dependent on his validation. And that realization, it can be both disarming and deeply attractive. Men are drawn to certainty, not the certainty of outcome, but the certainty of essence. A woman who knows who she is, who doesn't abandon herself to be liked, who holds space for her own desires without chasing someone else's approval, that woman is unforgettable. She becomes the one he can't stop thinking about, not because she played a game, but because she embodied what every soul craves: inner freedom. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who didn't need anything from you to be whole, who was kind but not needy, present but not clinging? Weren't you drawn to them, not just for what they said or did, but for how they made you feel? That's the power you hold when you stop chasing. You stop sending the energy of "please choose me," and you start radiating the energy of "I already choose myself." And that changes everything. But this kind of energy isn't built overnight. It takes time. It takes practice. It takes unlearning decades of conditioning that told you love is something to earn rather than something to allow. It takes forgiving the parts of yourself that chased because they didn't know better. It takes showing up for yourself even when someone else pulls away. And most of all, it takes trust. Trust that the right connections won't need to be forced, that the love meant for you won't make you feel like you're constantly negotiating for scraps. When you stop chasing, you make space. Space for the right man to step up, to lead, to pursue, not because you manipulated him into it, but because your energy invited him into a dynamic of mutual respect. You're not proving anything. You're not chasing potential. You're standing in your truth. And that is the most powerful invitation of all. Somewhere along the way, many women begin to orbit around someone else. His moods, his attention, his availability. Suddenly they become the weather patterns of your day. You wake up feeling fine, but then you check your phone. No message. A pang in your chest. You wonder if he's upset or bored or pulling away. And slowly, almost without realizing, your emotional world starts revolving around his. But here's the truth: you were never meant to orbit. You were meant to be the center. Coming back to yourself is not about being selfish. It's about remembering your own gravity, your own rhythm, your own voice, your own joy. It's about recentering your life so that your happiness doesn't depend on someone else's temperature. When you stop chasing, you begin the gentle but powerful work of reclaiming space inside yourself. You stop asking, "What does he want from me?" and start asking, "What do I actually need?" This shift doesn't happen with a single journal prompt or a bubble bath. It's deeper than that. It's when you pause in the middle of the day and ask, "Have I abandoned myself today? Did I silence a feeling to keep the peace? Did I dim my voice just to be easier to love? Did I check my phone more than I checked in with my heart?" And if the answer is yes, you meet it with compassion, not shame. Because self-abandonment is a habit that often forms in women who had to make themselves small to be accepted, who learned from a young age that being easy was safer than being honest. that being pleasing was more valuable than being real. But you're not that girl anymore. You don't have to play that role. Coming back to yourself means making daily choices that affirm your value whether he calls or not. It's saying no to plans that don't nourish you. It's wearing that outfit because you love how it makes you feel, not because you think he'll notice. It's letting your phone ring without anxiety when it's quiet on his end. It's knowing that silence is information, not a command to panic. And slowly, something shifts. You begin to enjoy your own company more than you enjoy the fantasy of someone who's inconsistent. You start craving peace more than passion that burns and fades. You remember that the love you were seeking outside already exists inside, but it's been buried beneath layers of self-doubt and external validation. Here's the magic of this part of the journey. When you become your own center, everything else rearranges itself. People either rise to meet your energy, or they fall away because they can't match it. And you stop taking that personally. You stop interpreting someone's inability to love you as a reflection of your worth. You start seeing it for what it is, a misalignment, not a rejection. And from that place of wholeness, you begin to attract differently. Not because you're trying to, but because your energy no longer vibrates with the frequency of chasing. You're not chasing anymore, you're choosing. And that subtle shift, it changes who you say yes to. It changes how you respond to hot and cold behavior. It changes what you tolerate. And it opens the door to relationships where you don't have to fight to be seen. You are not a side note in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And when you write from a place of inner truth, the people who are meant to read your story will feel it deeply, and they won't make you chase. They'll meet you, they'll choose you, and it will feel calm, not chaotic. There's a quiet truth that feels almost too simple to believe. Love that is real doesn't need to be chased. It doesn't require you to constantly prove your value or perform perfection. It doesn't vanish when you take a breath and stop trying so hard. In fact, often when you stop pushing, when you finally let go of the effort, that's when what's true begins to reveal itself. Because when you're constantly chasing, you can't see clearly. You're caught in a cycle of overgiving, overthinking, overcompensating. You're too busy managing someone else's attention to notice how your own heart is starving. But when you step back, when you stop feeding a dynamic that thrives on your uncertainty, everything quiets. And in that stillness, you begin to notice the difference between love and longing. Longing wears the costume of love. It feels passionate, intense, all-consuming. It gives you highs and lows. But it's not rooted in reality. It's rooted in hope. Hope that if you try just a little harder, he'll change. Hope that if you sacrifice a little more, he'll finally see your worth. But that's not love. That's emotional gambling. And you deserve more than a love that depends on how much effort you can sustain. Real love, the kind that holds honors and expands you, doesn't come from pressure. It comes from presence. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's not about chasing. It's about connecting. When a man is truly available, emotionally mature and ready, he won't make you wonder. He won't make you earn it. He'll meet you where you are, and he'll want to keep showing up not because you asked him to, but because he wants to. You don't have to run after that kind of man. In fact, if you do, it will confuse the dynamic. Because the moment you start chasing, you take on a role you were never meant to play, the one who pursues, who proves, who performs. But that's not your role. That's not your design. You were made to receive, to attract, to choose from a place of knowing, not needing. The women who draw in the most devotion aren't the ones who chase. They're the ones who rest. Not in apathy, but in certainty. They rest in the belief that if someone truly values them, they won't have to perform to keep their interest. They rest in the awareness that their worth is not a question waiting to be answered by someone else's behavior. And here's where it gets even more powerful when you stop chasing the men who were never serious about you. Vanish. They fall away because they were never there for the right reasons. They were there for the chase, the attention, the emotional labor you provided. And when you remove yourself from that dynamic, they're left with nothing to feed on. But the ones who are meant to stay, they step forward. They meet you. They make it known. Letting go of chasing isn't about giving up on love. It's about trusting that the kind of love you truly desire doesn't require you to lose yourself to get it. It's about believing that there is nothing more attractive than a woman who stands in her wholeness and says, "I'm not running after anyone. I'm rooted in myself, and I will only rise for what rises for me." So take a breath. Let yourself soften. Let yourself stop. Not because you don't care, but because you finally do about you. Let love come to you naturally, honestly, effortlessly. And if it doesn't, then maybe it wasn't love in the first place. So if chasing doesn't work, if leaning in only pushes him further away, what do you do instead? You stop running, and you start returning. Returning to your breath, returning to your boundaries, returning to your body, returning to the quiet knowing inside you that says, "I don't have to prove myself to be loved." And from that place, you begin to make subtle, powerful shifts. First, you create space, not as a tactic, but as an act of respect for yourself. You don't reply immediately when you're feeling anxious. You don't send that long message explaining yourself again. You don't rush to fix the gap between you. Instead, you sit with the discomfort. You breathe through it. You listen to what that discomfort is really trying to teach you. Because here's the truth. Not chasing doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing the inner work instead of external performance. It means sitting with your own triggers rather than trying to control someone else's behavior. It means learning to ride the waves of uncertainty without abandoning yourself just to feel safe again. You start pouring into yourself in real, meaningful ways. Not the surface-level distractions, but real nourishment. You read something that stretches your mind. You move your body because it helps you feel alive again. You spend time with people who make you laugh without having to shrink. You remind yourself in 100 small ways that your life is full with or without his attention. You also start holding boundaries that honor your energy. You don't initiate conversations that don't feel reciprocated. You don't over-explain when someone ghosts or fades away. You don't keep giving to someone who only takes. And when you feel that familiar urge to reach out to chase you, pause. You ask, is this action coming from love or from fear? If it's fear, you wait. You tend to yourself first. You give yourself the reassurance you were about to beg for from him. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear. Not dramatically, not with bitterness, but with quiet dignity. You remove your energy from where it isn't being honored. You stop showing up where you're not being met. And you let the silence speak, because it will. Silence is not emptiness, it's clarity. It tells you everything you need to know about someone's interest, someone's investment, someone's willingness to meet you halfway. But here's the beautiful twist. When you do this, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, you become magnetic. Your energy changes. You're no longer broadcasting need or tension. You're simply living, grounded, present, unbothered. And that shift, it's felt by everyone, especially him. Men notice when a woman stops chasing. It creates contrast. It makes them pause. They feel the loss of your presence, your softness, your care. And if they were ever serious about you, they will come forward. Not because you begged, but because your absence reminded them of your value. And if they don't, then you've just been spared from a relationship that was never truly mutual. You haven't lost anything, you've gained space for something real. So what do you do instead of chasing? You rise. Quietly. Consistently. Intentionally. You stop asking, how do I keep him? And start asking, how do I keep myself? Because in the end, the woman who holds her own energy, who honors her own time, who doesn't run after someone who isn't choosing her, that woman, is unforgettable. And if he doesn't realize it now, he will, sooner or later. And by then, it may be too late, because you'll have already chosen something greater. You'll have chosen you. You might think he doesn't notice, that when you stop texting, stop checking in, stop bending over backwards to keep the connection alive, he won't care. But he does. Even if he doesn't say a word, he feels it. Because energy doesn't lie. When you shift yours, it lands. And sometimes that quiet shift is more powerful than any confrontation. Men are far more intuitive than we give them credit for. They can sense when your heart is pulling away even before you fully admit it to yourself. They know when your energy is no longer reaching toward them, when your body is in the room, but your spirit has stepped back. They may not articulate it, but they feel the change. And for many men, that's the wake-up call they never expected. When you were chasing, reaching, proving, overgiving, he could feel that too. That pressure, that tension, that quiet undercurrent of please notice me. It's not always conscious, but it's there. And for someone who's not ready or emotionally unavailable, it becomes overwhelming. Not because you're too much, but because they were never willing to meet you halfway. And when that imbalance exists, your effort becomes a mirror for their inadequacy. So they pull away. But the moment you stop, the moment your energy becomes centered again, everything shifts. Not just for you, but for him. Suddenly, he notices the absence of your attention like a room missing its warmth. The conversations don't flow the same. His days feel a little emptier. He checks his phone and sees nothing. And in that space, he's left with himself, with the realization that something valuable has quietly slipped away. This is where the dynamic reverses, not because you played a game, but because you returned to yourself. Your absence becomes the most powerful presence in his life. It speaks louder than any emotional plea, because it's not about punishment. It's about recalibration. You've stopped trying to convince someone of your worth, and instead you're living it. And the truth is, some men need that silence to finally hear their own feelings. They need that distance to realize what your presence truly meant. When you were always available, always giving, always softening, it was easy to take for granted, easy to assume you'd always be there. But when you stepped back, not angrily but gracefully, it created space for them to feel the consequences of their passivity. And for the right man, that space becomes a mirror. He sees his own fears, his own emotional laziness, his own unreadiness. And if he's capable, he grows, he rises, he meets you, not just with words, but with action, clarity, and consistency. But here's the key: you can't shift your energy to manipulate his. You can't pull back just to watch him chase. That's not power, that's performance. And men can feel that too. The energy of true detachment is peaceful, not reactive. It's calm, not calculated. It doesn't need results. It trusts the process. So when you shift, when you truly come back to yourself, do it for you. Not to spark a reaction, but to reclaim your balance. And whatever he feels in response is his to carry. Because the woman who no longer chases becomes the woman he remembers. The woman who no longer begs becomes the one he can't forget. And the woman who walks away without bitterness but with grace becomes the one he never truly gets over. You don't need to shout your worth. You just need to live it, quietly, steadily, unapologetically. You're a woman who feels deeply, who loves fully, who gives from the heart. That is not your weakness, it's your gift. But somewhere along the way, you may have learned that to love deeply means to give endlessly, that to care means to compromise, that to be enough means to shrink your needs so he doesn't feel pressured. But love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love. It's sacrifice masquerading as connection. So the real question becomes, how do you love with your whole heart, without losing yourself in the process? It begins with this simple truth. You are allowed to have boundaries and still be loving. You are allowed to say, this doesn't feel good, and not fear rejection. You are allowed to walk away from someone you adore because they can't meet you where you are. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. Loving deeply is not about pouring out everything and hoping someone catches it. It's about knowing how to hold your own cup while sharing from the overflow. When you chase someone, you're pouring from emptiness. But when you stand in your worth, you love from fullness. And that kind of love is magnetic. It doesn't beg, it invites. It doesn't grasp, it flows. So how do you begin loving without losing yourself? You listen. First to yourself. When something feels off, you don't ignore it just because you're afraid of confrontation. When a pattern keeps repeating, you don't explain it away. You pay attention to the quiet voice inside you, the one that speaks before your mind has a chance to rationalize. That voice is your truth, and it's always guiding you home. Next you speak. Kindly, clearly, unapologetically. You don't hint hope or twist yourself into knots trying to be understood. You express your needs not to demand, but to reveal. Because healthy love is built on mutual understanding, not guessing games. The right person will want to know you. Not just the curated version, but the full, unfiltered you. You also hold. You hold your boundaries even when it's uncomfortable. Even when part of you wants to bend. Because every time you honor your boundary, you tell your nervous system, I've got you. I won't abandon you for the illusion of connection. And that builds trust, not just with others, but with yourself. And finally, you choose. Not based on fear or loneliness or chemistry alone, but from clarity. You choose people who make you feel safe, seen, and steady. You choose relationships that expand you rather than exhaust you. You choose peace over chaos, truth over potential presence over promises. Because here's the most sacred truth: the deeper you love yourself, the less you'll tolerate a love that cost you your center. You won't chase because there will be nothing in you that believes you need to. You'll know deeply that the right man will never ask you to trade your self-worth for his attention. He will come. He will stay. He will choose you freely, not because you chased, but because you didn't. Loving deeply doesn't mean losing yourself. It means bringing your whole self to love and trusting that the right heart will know how to hold it. There's a turning point in every woman's journey where she no longer begs to be chosen. She becomes the one who does the choosing. She no longer waits for a text to validate her worth. She no longer builds her day around a maybe. She no longer twists her energy into shapes just to fit into someone else's inconsistency. And in that moment, without fanfare or announcement, she becomes unforgettable. Because the woman who no longer chases becomes rare. She's the one he thinks about late at night, not because she tried the hardest, but because she walked away with grace. Because she didn't fight to be seen. She simply refused to stay where she was invisible. Because she didn't shout her worth, she embodied it in silence. And that silence echoes. It lingers. It grows louder the longer she's gone. This is the woman he can't replace. Not because she made herself indispensable, but because she left a space that cheap affection can't fill. Her energy was real. Her care was felt. Her presence was steady. And when it's gone, it doesn't just leave a void, it leaves a mirror, a reflection of what he wasn't ready to hold. And maybe, just maybe, that reflection is what finally makes him grow. But here's the truth. No one tells you by the time he realizes what he lost, you'll have already evolved. You'll have already outgrown the version of yourself that waited, that hoped, that chased. You'll be living a life that feels full again, not because of someone else, but because of how deeply you've chosen yourself. You'll look in the mirror and see a woman who no longer negotiates her value, who no longer mistakes potential for commitment, who no longer tries to heal through giving. You'll see a woman who is soft but not bendable, open but not available to just anyone, loving but deeply selective. A woman who doesn't need to chase because she knows what's meant for her will never require her to. And from that place, something shifts in the universe around you. The connections you attract are different. The way people speak to you changes. The way men approach you changes. Not because you've hardened, but because you've clarified. You've become aligned with the frequency of self-respect, and everything that no longer matches that frequency falls away. And maybe he will come back. Maybe he'll finally see what he missed. Maybe he'll try to reach for you again. But here's the question. Will you still be standing in the same place he left you? Or will you have walked so far into your power that the version of you who chased no longer exists? Because once you've tasted what it feels like to be your own home, you don't run after someone else's. You don't chase because you don't need to. You are the woman who stopped chasing and became the one worth chasing. Not through strategy, but through truth. Not through silence games, but through soulful alignment. Not through withholding love, but through refusing to give it where it wasn't held with care. And that is the kind of woman he doesn't forget. That is the kind of woman who changes the game. That is the kind of woman you were always meant to be. So here you are. After all the pain, the patterns, the questions. After all the times you stayed up overthinking, overgiving, overanalyzing a man who couldn't or wouldn't meet you where your heart lived. And you've come to the quiet, powerful realization you were never meant to chase. Not because you're above effort, not because love doesn't take courage, but because chasing was never aligned with your truth. Your worth was never supposed to be earned through running after someone who kept walking away. You were meant to be seen, to be met, to be loved in the way your soul always knew was possible. Not the kind of love that comes with conditions, not the kind that needs to be decoded or chased down, but the kind of love that arrives with clarity, that speaks through consistency, that feels like calm in a world of chaos, the kind of love that makes you feel safe without asking you to shrink. This is not about bitterness. It's not about pretending you don't care or building walls so no one can get in. No, this is about softness with boundaries, openness with discernment, loving deeply without leaking energy into places that cannot hold you. You can still be the woman who feels everything. You can still be the woman who loves hard. But now, you love wisely. You love consciously. You love without forgetting who you are. Because the moment you stopped chasing, you created space for something better. Not just better love, but a better relationship with yourself. A version of you who is no longer addicted to potential, who no longer sees silence as mystery, but as a message, who no longer waits for someone to see her because she already sees herself. And when you walk through the world like that rooted present whole, you become undeniable. You become a woman who doesn't chase because she knows what's real will never require her to. So take a breath, beautiful soul. You've done enough. You've tried enough. You've given enough. Now, receive. The right one will find you not because you chased him, but because you finally stopped running and stood still long enough for him to recognize the woman he could never replace. And when that moment comes, it won't feel like chaos. It will feel like peace. And this time, you won't have to question it, because this time you won't be chasing. You'll be choosing.